Mic check 1 2 1 2. See if my volume is up. My volume is up. Mic check 1 2 1 2. See if anybody in the chat can hear me. And if they can, if you could, press 1 in the chat. Raining woman, good evening to you. First one in the chat. Thank you for the confirmation. Diary of an SLP clinician. Good evening to you. D Felder, what's going on? Rocky 10, what's going on? Thank you for the confirmations. It's greatly appreciated. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is Black Business Talk, episode 278. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those on the community posts. Lando, what's going on? Engineering Cannabis, what's going on? Engineering Cannabis, if you want to get on, let us know. We can get you on. Yeah. So I actually just got back in, so I'm starting this hangout late. Had to meet up with some people. Reason why we're having this hangout is doing some volunteer work with some solidarity groups on the ground today. I'll set. Let me share the pictures real quick. Uh, all right, give me a few seconds. All right, so Dr. Phoenix, what's going on? Lando, what's going on? Share my screen real quick. Let me let Complex in. Complex, you got to raise your hand to join the panel. Give me a second. Okay. Hey, what's going on, Complex?
Hey, Mike, what's going on, G?
Chilling, man, chilling.
All right.
Yeah, so did some volunteer work today on the ground with some solidarity groups, Palestinians, Puerto Ricans, which are Puerto Ricans, um, and um, and some Haitians. So this is the garden that we were working on today. Basically, planting broccoli, squash. Let me go through the pictures. Collard greens, as you can see right here. This is a full view of the lot that was recently acquired from the city. Um, I got a couple more pictures too. But basically, what was happening here today was that I learned a couple of things about guerrilla farming, which is the actual title. And with guerrilla farming, what previously happened was that urban farming was actually illegal. Um, I think in most states in the United States, and that meant that if if you wanted to become your own farmer, you could not do this. So the major farming industry or the major farmers in agriculture had eliminated any sort of competition, and that lot is a reclaimed lot from many of the houses that were built pre 1970 before the ban on lead paint. And a lot of those houses that were built back then, they either burned down or they were abandoned because of white flight. And because of white flight, um, they were left to rot or whatever it was, become blighted, and the city ended up reclaiming a lot of those properties that became vacant lots later because they were built with asbestos and things like that, other poisonous chemicals. And when those houses came down, the lead paint also got into the dirt, so you couldn't actually plant anything on there unless you did a whole lot of excavation of the dirt and turned that soil over. You needed backhoes and bobcats and things like that, other sort of agricultural equipment that would allow you to turn that dirt over and make it suitable for planting crops and things like that. So with that being said, a lot of those lots, there's over 12,000 of them across the country. um, I think there's something like maybe 100,000 are not actually suitable for farming. So in order for you to farm on it, the cheapest way is to put wood chips on top of it by 4 layers, and then put a earth blanket on it, and then put more wood chips on it, and then you could put more soil on it to plant crops. Why is this important? It's because this is about sustainability. And now with the legalization of cannabis, this has allowed these vacant lots to actually be turned over into spaces for green development and growing your own cannabis and things of that nature, getting into the legalization and social equity. And
So it's a guerrilla approach to that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now they've been doing this in Puerto Rico for years, probably long before we were born. But this is the type of stuff that they've had to deal with because of the poison that DuPont and Monsanto had did to the island.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the soil down there is not suitable either for growing crops
Hmm.
in certain places. You have anything you want to add to this complex?
I'm gonna follow along for a minute because I am gonna have some stuff to say. I wanted to kind of hear more about what it was that you had got into and check out some of those pictures. But I mean, as far as like communal farming and stuff like that. Well, let me just touch on that real quick because in areas like okay, so in LA, for example, in places like Echo Park, Eagle Rock, all that. Now, if we went back to the 90s and all that, if you remember movies like Mi Vida Loca and stuff like
Mhm.
that, American History X, okay, there was a lot of scenes that were shot in locales like East LA where they showed like a lot of, you know, bad or ghetto type neighborhoods that were largely inhabited by like the Mexicans, right? And so there
Mhm.
was a lot of like gang activity and stuff like that had gone on. And then during like the early to mid 2000s, the gentrification hit in those areas. And
Mhm.
see, and those had been areas that were largely Latino for a very long time. Same thing, certain corners and stuff like that. It was just open lots,
Mhm.
right? Just nothing there. Like house had been torn down, maybe it caught fire or whatever it was, and then it's just an empty lot there, right? And then gentrification hits. Next, hipsters roll in. Now we got the same type of setups that you just saw in that picture, right? We got guerrilla farming, communal farms. Like you roll around East LA, all that type of stuff. It's all over the place. People, and it's like a community thing, right? So there might be like a local, like a little nonprofit that's set up for the community. And then what they do is people they'll section out the farm, right? So one person's growing the greens over here. This person's got the broccoli over here. This person's got this over here. Then they're harvesting and they're going to the local farm markets, making their little money, putting a chunk away into like a communal chest, if you will. You know, so some of the street level benefits of doing things like guerrilla farming, I can speak to it firsthand just by what had gone on in East LA, and you've seen it in other parts of LA too, and in areas where Black folks still are the majority, still. That can change in the next few years, but I can speak to the guerrilla farming movement, just by like some of the things that have gone on in LA.
Yeah, it's dope. I'm not sure if LA had the same conditions in terms of like
Similar, similar.
poisoning of the soil or the soil and stuff like that.
Yeah, similar. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, similar.
Hmm. But yeah, all in all, I had a great time. Met some new people. Um, Shared some ideas about community development, as well as solidarity work. Uh, you know, hit and run tactics that are going to be viable going forward. Everybody's talking about the legalization of cannabis, $8
Mm,
billion industry in California, 2019. Um, and you know, ADOS isn't. Let me get away from that. Black Americans are not really a part of that conversation for the most part.
hmm.
But you see non. You see the formation of other groups coming together to build solidarity and say, you know what, this is something that we can get into, and something that's viable. How do we go about it? Acquiring these vacant lots, popping up green, popping up biodomes and greenhouses on them,
Yeah.
doing the actual sweat equity as we were doing today. It was burning hot out there. I think it was like 85, 90 degrees, man. And my back was killing me.
Mm,
Bending over and stuff like that. Creating irrigation systems, indigenous and using just ingenuity, man. Coming up with different strategies of how to leverage some of the water that came down from the rain and creating all types of piping and stuff like that.
Mike, I know you want to stay away from that hashtag. I
Mm-hmm.
know we talked earlier. I know you want to stay away from it, right? Um, but I will say this. I would say that for the topic of this discussion, um, you know, perhaps some of perhaps some of the details in this discussion can be leveraged into some sort of actual plan or platform for that hashtag in the event that they decide to abandon the circular arguments and actually move to creating a plan, right? So let's actually speak with, a tone of suggestion, if you will, for something that could actually work for that hashtag. And I think that this is one of the first things that we could actually add onto the docket, because see, in a lot of blighted Black communities where you have a lot of empty lots, vacant housing, stuff like that. I mean, we're talking about a practical use for these types of empty spaces. Wouldn't you say so?
Absolutely. There's over 100,000 lots across the United States in predominantly Black neighborhoods that are just like this.
Oh, okay.
So you can create massive um, uh, uh, um, greenhouses that can, grow food all year round. Because you remember, for those who don't know, a greenhouse actually traps the heat
Yeah.
inside, even in the wintertime,
Yep.
especially if you have a more advanced one.
Yeah.
And the water is still going. So we were able to tap the pipe from the street, actually bring water in, and we were watering all day long, man. So we banged out a lot of work in just 4 hours,
Mm-hmm.
four and a
Yeah.
half hours.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because yeah, when you grow in a greenhouse environment, like especially if you're lining the greenhouse with compost, for example, that has, live culture in it. That culture, there's a living organism just like your body. It gives off heat. So in a greenhouse environment, you would be looking at, say, you could be out, you could be outside, right? And let's say the weather's 10 degrees or something like that. But see, inside the greenhouse, it'd be about 45, right? So there's typically, in a greenhouse environment, you're looking at about anywhere from a 30 to 40 degree difference from the outside temperature versus the inside temperature. So at 45, 50 degrees, there's still a multitude of produce that can be grown in that temperature. You see, so yeah, even in places like Chicago, Detroit, wherever, where, as soon as you hit around November, December, the temperature drops drastically in greenhouse environments. Okay, well, you're still going to have a live culture environment within that greenhouse that's going to trap the radiant heat and allow for a growing environment to exist. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And there's all types of strategies that you can use. It doesn't matter the size of the parcel, which is a lot. It doesn't matter the size. If you have the mindset to go in there and say, okay, this is like a size of a garage. Well, you know what? We're gonna throw a biodome right up on that garage space, and we're gonna create something out of it. Something's gonna grow in there. And you have people that you assign roles and responsibilities to come in there and actually manage that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shared equity. So whether I'm there or Complex is there or somebody else is there to look at this, this is actually going to be self sustaining, so that it can actually produce something out of it, whether it's just fruits and vegetables or cannabis for that matter.
Yeah, leafy greens. It could be all kind of stuff, man. I've seen there's you could check out microgreen, small scale microgreen business. You can just type that in YouTube. There's guys that are growing microgreens in their closet. Microgreens would be things like wheatgrass, like short grass herbs, stuff like that. So they'll grow this stuff in their closet because the crops are so small. They're microgreens. But these dudes are turning like $9,000 a month growing microgreens hydroponically in their closets. You see? So, I mean, even if you didn't have a garage space, if you had a closet space, there's dudes that are they're making, a lucrative business, being small scale farmers. So it can happen on a micro scale. It can happen, on a small scale, like in a garage, like you just said, outdoor in an empty lot. And there's all these various methods for being able to harvest year round and to cultivate.
Yep,
You know,
rooftops on top of apartment buildings.
rooftops. That's another one. Yeah.
Yep. So there's a lot of ways that you can do this. We can get um, rain barrel collection systems set up, and actually, even if you don't have access to a main water supply, there's your water supply right there. So when we talk about the Black Brain Trust actually being pro-black and being black first, and actually putting boots on the ground, we were putting boots on the ground today. It's not the first time we've done it this year. So this is probably maybe the fifth time this year we've gone out and done some of this work. And we're actually going to do more work next week.
Yep.
Another farm with some more indigenous people, more Native Americans who show mad love and solidarity to Black Americans, as well as the Black Brain Trust. So one of these days they're going to come onto the panel, and we're going to have a real discussion, sharpen up some real game that most of these other channels that you see in the manosphere aren't doing.
Yep. And I'm gonna post something here. Hold on, give me just a minute. Messed up. What's good? Okay, engineering cannabis. You dropped through. Okay, that's what's up. Okay. Yeah, hopefully he can drop through too. Somebody who's knowledgeable in the cannabis industry who's joined us. He actually joined us on our last Black Cannabis podcast, and I'll let me take a minute to apologize for Noah and I not being able to get, or Anti-Gravity and I not being able to get the next episode off the ground. I've taken on some new work. Noah's been busy with work, and we just haven't had a chance to really get that episode up and going. But we'll cover some of the articles that we've had planned that we have on the docket for the hangout that we've been trying to get off the ground for the last few weeks. So we'll cover some of that content here this evening. But I just did post a link to a method of hydroponic growing that I've had experience doing a multitude of things, cannabis being one of them, lettuce and other types of produce being another. But essentially, it's a very passive hydroponic method called the Cracky method. So I posted a link there for people to do their own research and check that out. But it's basically a hydroponic method that's kind of like a set it and forget it, right? You see, so even if there's not a whole lot of time to be attentive to it, the very little time that you do have can be spent just tending to the garden, checking, clipping whatever dead foliage is on the plants and stuff like that. However, the Cracky method of hydroponics is a very passive method of growing. So it doesn't really, once you set it all up and you get the plants in there and all that, pretty much you leave it alone. You see, so there's methods of being able to do this type of stuff where you don't even have to be the most knowledge. You don't have to have all of the knowledge about planting and growing and soil pH and all this type of stuff. You know what I mean? It's like that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that there's actually the Urban Farming Institute that is going nationwide. So they're actually teaching people how to grow, how to get into the farming game from a micro standpoint. So from your windowsill all the way down to your backyard to a more broader parcel.
Okay.
And going about acquiring parcels from the city, because if it's going to be used for agricultural purposes, then you almost get it for $0. For pennies on the dollar, for that matter.
Yeah.
Most of the time, what you're paying is the back taxes on it, and they'll wipe out 90% of the back taxes if you can come with 10%.
Not only that, but also if and I think there was a hangout, man, some time back. Dr. Phoenix and I kind of spoke to this a little bit, but if the produce that you're going to be growing on that is then going to be sold, say like at a farmer's market. Okay. And as a farmer, if you're agreeing to accept like EBT disbursements, food stamps and stuff like that.
Yep.
Then so on the back end, on the municipal side, the way the books balance out, it's like, okay, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and give you the parcel for pennies on the dollar if you're going to make the food available,
Mm-hmm.
right, for people who have EBT and food stamps and stuff like that to purchase it. You
Yep.
see, so even those who receive that, look, you can go to the farmer's market and buy fresh local produce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that doesn't have to be spent at some corner store bodega where the lettuce is all wilted and the bananas are brown and the meat is old.
Right. Right. And that's a good point that you brought up about the EBT perspective. All of that stuff is actually part of this whole entire program.
Okay.
So they won't be sending this to the market. They're going to sell it right there on the land itself. So
they'll have like a little farm stand.
Yeah, that's what's being built in the back. Let me show.
Oh, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's being built back here. So all this is going to be built out for that. All up here, they're growing stuff up top. You can't see it from here, but all up here. Let me see if I can show some of the other pictures.
Wow.
Yep, all around this fence right here is being constructed for that very purpose. And it's going to extend out from here as well. Let me see if I can find another picture.
Yeah, I see that little structure that's being built back there.
Yeah, that's all a part of the process. Right there is where the water is being pumped from. There's a sink and stuff right there. There. Yeah, so this is going to extend all the way out to the fence over here, another maybe 5 or 10 yards. And there's stuff growing here as well.
Dope.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of stuff, man. There's some ideas of maybe raising the fence up and growing more stuff on top of the fence.
Along the fence, like so to use it kind of like a trellis.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, is this was it how did this project come about?
There's been a movement, man, for a minute. But this happened after Puerto Rico, after the Puerto Rican hurricane, was it Maria?
Something like that.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of discussion about how to go about, basically I got on board through a campaign called Engineering Disaster. And Engineering Disaster was about, man-made issues to climate change. Mm-hmm. And what happened with Puerto Rico was that the United States did not respond to Puerto Rico in a way that would, actually help them survive. They basically told them to go screw. So people started looking at other methods of how to be self-sustaining. And mm-hmm. same thing with Haiti, right? Haiti had the earthquake disaster, and the Clinton Foundation went in, and Red Cross, and no houses were built.
Well, they built like 3 houses or something like that.
Yeah, three that they stayed in. That's the sort of stuff that was being discussed there, and that's how it came about, and that's how I got involved with the group. And I started meeting other indigenous people, and we went to their farms, and they were acquiring acres and acres of land from the government. Man, this is happening in real time. These people are woke. They're real woke. They not letting down. They not sitting behind keyboards, having 13-hour hangouts about nothing. They out there on the grind for real. They out there really with their guns too. They hold guns too. So,
I was gonna say you got to. I done spoke to a few brothers, because they contacted me to do some consults about like cannabis and hemp.
Mm-hmm.
And all the different levels upon which to get involved. What are the pros? What are the cons? And a lot of there's when we start off looking to get into that realm, we're like, okay, I want to get a farm, grow the hemp, do this, do that. And I was like, all right, look, here's the thing. First thing I'm gonna ask you is this: Are you down to arm up, get your security game up? Having like pit bulls and German shepherds and stuff roaming your lot. Infrared, cameras with infrared lighting, drones, and guns, lots of guns. Because trust and believe, if you're not armed up, people will come in and snatch your crop.
So, hello, can you hear me?
Is this engineering?
Yep, this is engineering.
What's good, G?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I've been hearing about your topic, and the one thing I haven't heard about, basically, yes, the growing is good, but the laws. If you look at the laws in Colorado and California, it's hard to get public or municipal resources like water and all that to be basically used in your growing. It's really expensive and it's really hard to get those kind of resources. So usually if you're a cannabis farmer or anything, you have to basically provide your own resources. But right now it's still very difficult to basically get public resources to basically use in your growing itself.
Well, this
So
right here. Well, this what you're seeing here. This isn't being going to be growing cannabis, right, Mike? This is all like just regular produce.
so
No, it will
regular
be. It will be at some point. They're building out the greenhouses next.
so
Okay,
regular
so okay,
regular produce is fine, but when you're dealing with cannabis hemp, it's very difficult to get tapped into the public resources, and it's very expensive to provide, especially if you're doing a commercial grow or any kind of big grow. Most of your expenses will come in trying to get the resources to basically get in your grow itself, from electricity to water and all that. And the biggest expense in most cannabis cultivation is the energy itself.
well,
Those are,
there's a few things to consider with regards to that, right? So this being a community project like this is the size. I mean, the size of the lot is right there in the picture, right? So I wouldn't necessarily classify anything that's being done here as a commercial grow, quote unquote, right? I think even by definition, a commercial grow is something that's uh,
the,
5,000 square feet or more, or something like that.
yeah,
And,
there are basically stipulations on the size of commercial grows and all that.
right,
Yeah.
right. So if we're talking about a few,
I would say this is about 5,000 square feet.
but
Um,
no, but this
I mean,
you're not growing hemp on
no,
5,000.
no, 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 no. It wouldn't qualify for that. But
Exactly.
that
Right.
lot
But
is about maybe 5 to 7,000 feet square feet.
okay, okay. But I can see like say like two 10 by 20 or 10 by 10 Harbor Freight greenhouses, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And I can see the growth happening inside those greenhouses, which then you're talking about like craft CBD plants at that point,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
talking, yeah, you know what I mean. Like you're talking about craft or well that's the term they're giving it now. Even they're using that in California and shit like that now, right? If it's smaller than commercial, it's called craft, quote unquote.
Yeah.
You see, so that would fall under a completely different set of
License.
statutes and licensing with regards to that. Now, Mike, maybe Mike can, we'll have to talk to Mike at length, but maybe Mike can fill us in on like from uh, for the legalities in Massachusetts. Do for something like that, like real small scale? It's not anything that's going to be quote unquote commercial. How does Massachusetts look at that?
Basically, if it's on your property, it's your business. And if you have permit from the city, a building permit, at this point, it's not really dissuaded at all. So
Yeah, because it's not commercial.
yeah, it's non-commercial. But what we have, brother, you gotta mute yourself up. I'm not
Hey,
sure if
Eugene,
you're
can you mute up a little bit?
not sure if you're on a Boeing 737 or something or what. Um, but yeah, some of the stuff that we've been discussing with I've been discussing with City Hall is that there's not enough real estate space for or retail space for cannabis grow shops.
Hmm.
So what's happening here is that they're saying maybe there should be a co-op developed. But my
Yeah.
thing is we should treat the retail cannabis sector in the same way we treat food trucks. We designate some zones for them each day of the week where they can actually pull up at, and they have that 8 hour slot where they can actually sell their product.
Yeah,
And then they
flowers,
can
extracts, etc. Right.
right, and then they can move on to another location. So that way, no one business can actually monopolize an area, a
Hmm.
designated zone, right? So you kind of Brother, I'm not sure what's going on with your.
Okay, there it goes.
Yeah.
Go
So,
ahead, Mike.
yeah. So if we can designate these zones throughout each neighborhood and each municipality, then what that allows is more um, social equity to go around for the minority-based businesses. More importantly, Black men who are disproportionately affected by the policies that impacted them.
So there are a lot of, in order to do that, there's a lot of complexities in there,
Mhm.
especially if you're trying to do something like that. Remember, there are systems like the track and trace, and you also have to take in consideration security. So, and with the banking system, there isn't any bank. So there's a lot of complexities to basically to come up with those kind of strategies, as you state. It's a very complex and very methodical way to do that, but it's very complex, and there's a lot of things you need to take in consideration when you're trying to do something like that.
Well, I'll tell you this. Coming from Cali, we've been at this since 1996, right?
Mhm.
Because that was when we went. That was when we went legal.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll agree that it's not just simply I pull the apples off my tree, put it in a little basket, and then walk my way down to the local farmers market and just say, here, buy my apples. Okay, no, it's not that simple. I understand that, but it's not as if the strategies already haven't been put out in place.
They,
Um,
mhm.
go ahead, Mike.
No, I
This
was just going to say that when I had this conversation back in June about this, May and June, they were 100% on board with it.
Yeah,
so
and the reason, and I don't mean to cut you off engineering, but the reason
no,
why, the reason why, is because if you're to look at California as a model, okay, if you look at California as a model, what essentially happened was that I think everybody on the day that we had to go vote on Prop 64, I think there was the weed was spiked and everybody voted yes on it
Mhm.
because what ended up happening is that what had been established since 1996 up until 2017, I think that's when we legalized. So 2017,
Mhm.
right? And full legalization went into effect 2018. So in late 2017, that's when it was voted on. So what do you think had been built up between 1996 and 2017? Essentially, uh, damn near a 30-year, 20-year period or stretch of 30 years in time. Basically, what happened was that the whole sort of communal co-op, it was all based on nonprofit organizations. So
Mhm.
everything was like a co-op, or it was like a buyers club, or it was something to where it was decentralized, so that you didn't have what you were just talking about, like territories and zones and what have you that were cordoned off or sectioned off, where this conglomerate's going to own this and this conglomerate's going to own that, and then basically any would-be entrepreneur would be presented with just an unaffordable um, you know they would be confronted with licensing and permitting that was just unaffordable for an entrepreneur to pursue,
By
you know
himself. Yeah.
by
so
himself. Exactly. You see,
Yeah.
so
So,
the thing about it is that there's different models and different methods just that I know of from people who have been in the industry here in California. All of those models and everything, they still exist and they still work today.
brother,
Bro, you
brother,
gotta you
brother,
gotta meet up, man.
yeah, you're,
Kind of loud.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're bungee jumping or what, man.
but yeah, it's not as if like the models don't exist. What you have to do is you have to either have the legal framework, or you have to have the municipal government that says, look, you know what we want to do? We want to support our local entrepreneurs, because if we freeze them out of local business activity and we basically just defer to large conglomerates who are going to do this, then we're largely cutting ourselves out of local tax revenues.
And they accepted the social equity platform for that very reason.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can't accept outsiders coming in. That's already off the table.
Yeah.
From the jump. So it has to include Black and brown people, which is why we've been having these discussions locally, you know, with solidarity groups, which is really what's tying in a lot of the solidarity groups on from a business aspect, saying, hey, this is actually viable opportunity. California is an $8 billion industry for 2019. How can you argue with this if you're a American Black or hashtag whatever you are? How can you complain? How can you even look at this and not see the viability behind it? I mean, the buckets that you see are all full of water because the irrigation system was just being put together. So regardless of what the situation was, you have to plant, you have to irrigate those plants somehow. So all of this is relatively new. This is only a few months old.
Now that you said on this property too, this used to be a house or
that had to be back in the 60s or something like that. That was a house.
Okay.
Yeah, that hasn't been filled at all in quite probably since the Cold War. That's been vacant like that for a long time. But it's available for pennies on the dollar, so they were able to acquire it.
Right.
So acquiring land is a part of the pro-Black agenda, right? You know, how do you find equity? Well, you're gonna find it in land reformation.
So in terms of cultivation, I did this in my last video. I usually use history as a judgment. Let's go to the prohibition. The people who made the money or the profits from there were brands. They were not the cultivators of corns or any. These were the individuals who made the money were brands from Cuba and all that came after even prohibition. The same thing is going to happen in the cannabis industry. The people who make the money are not the cultivators. The people who make the money are not the farmers. The people who make the money are the brands who come in and basically convert THC or CBD into a viable product. So the cultivators, the farms, let's say if Pepsi or somebody comes into the play, they will buy all the farms, then get their product and basically get the product and turn it into their brand. So the goal of anybody who's going into this industry is to basically develop a brand based on your product. Your goal is not to just be a farmer or cultivator. Your goal is to be a brand.
Yeah.
It's happening right now in California.
I'm not disagreeing with you, brother. I'm not disagreeing with you. Let me make my statement. What's happening here is you have to get the land first. It doesn't matter what the big brands are doing. You have to get the land first. That's the first objective, is to get the land. Then you can focus on the business acumen perspective. Somebody else is going to focus on that. And then the other aspect is actually getting it to market, right? So there's a whole entire business life cycle that's involved in that, to go from the dirt all the way to the retail. So there's all types of discussion that's happening right now. And I think One United Bank, which is a Black bank, the number one Black bank in America, that's headquartered here, is actually talking about getting on board with this.
Yeah, Mike, and the reason being is because there's recent legislation that looks like that's going to be passed, because I think it has the numbers to pass.
Yeah, for the bank.
That is going to start to allow for banks to actually house funds that come from legal cannabis sales, right? In states that have a legal statute on the books. But just to backtrack real quick to what engineering was saying, I'll tell you this much, bro. So when you look at in what you're saying in terms of brands and what have you, now traditionally I would agree with you. However, being in California, I'm going to have to disagree with you. It's the reason why the black market is proliferating the way it is right now. Because what ended up happening was just what you talked about. The bigwigs came in, right? And so they're the dudes who buy from the farmers, or for anybody who's decided to go ahead and hop on board and sell their harvest at maybe a quarter of what they were making. Right, just in order to stay in business. This is what they're doing right now. What's happening though is that this bud that these large brands, quote unquote, are selling out of the dispensaries at an inflated price is actually not of the quality of the stuff of the local homegrown dude who has his homebrew hydroponic solution that he's been developing for the last 10 years, that he's been growing his shit in, right? Something that's specific to Kush, something that's specific to sativa, and all that type of stuff. Look, when you go into the dispensaries out here now, you paying 45, 50 bucks for an eighth of weed that really it ain't got no gas to it, ain't got no fume to it. Versus the dude who's farming in his backyard or inside in one of the empty rooms that he has in his pad, and he's sliding that to you for 25, 30 bucks, and that's that loud. So people are opting not to actually go for brands just simply because of the fact that, you know,
Okay.
a large scale company came in due to legalization and just said, hey, well, look, you know, this is the hot thing. I mean, I would say that people who are cannabis consumers, people who medicate regularly and stuff like that, they're very discerning. I sure as hell know I am.
Yes.
So let's all agree this. Is it in the near future this will be federally legalized at
Yes.
some point?
Yeah.
So the question is, now you talked about you're not going for brands, but remember when it's federally legalized, now there's an import and export industry.
Yes.
Where you can import and export it from different countries with different strains at a cheaper amount. So at that point, the brands still win. Because at that point,
No, not necessarily. So let's look at the Walmart situation, right? Just as from a retail perspective, Walmart can't operate in places like New York City or Boston because, you know, the local regulations forbid them from even coming in.
it
Yeah,
depends.
I was gonna say we have to look at what type of trade policies we have on the books of various nations. That's the first thing that's going to determine what type of imported weed is going to be coming in here and from where.
Those are the laws. Yes, you have to look in the laws. That's why I always tell people, start looking at Canada, because Canada's laws. I always look at the laws and the import and export laws in Canada, and what countries are they exporting and importing currently, which can be mimicked. If it federally legalizes in the United States, they might mimic Canada. So I always say, look at the laws in terms of Canadian laws and see how the export and import market is going in there, and see what kind of strains are and where they're getting those import and exports from.
I just going based on all the previous analysis that Anti-Gravity and I have done, I'll tell you right now, the U.S., much like the tech markets, the U.S. has largely insulated itself to a point where it can't actually leverage importation because it's isolated itself so much. Whereas Canada, right from the rip, had a national agenda: one, to go legal, and two, to be a global leader in this industry. Okay, the United States has actually done the complete opposite. Right, we're still to this
But
day.
we have to catch up. At one point, we will have to catch up.
No, that could take a long time.
That's what I'm saying. We're in no disagreements there, because look, you still have states that aren't even legal, right? Yes. And not only do you not have states that aren't legal, the Fed hasn't moved on it. So you got, not only that, you got politicians that are like, you know what? Well, we're gonna push for legislation, even though the Fed is dragging its feet. Certain states are dragging its feet. Look, we've got states that could benefit from this to such an extent where it could look, if you did it the right way, if you allowed for some sort of banking mechanism, and if the states themselves says, you know what, out of this state we'll export and we'll import, okay, you're going to start to change literally the scope of the nation in terms of regional revenues, right, by state.
But in this country especially, the biggest driver of change is economics. So
you would I mean, no disagreements there. Go ahead.
So if the biggest driver is in economics, and let's say it's been predicted a recession is coming in the next year or so. Mm-hmm. So if those states with legal cannabis has huge profit margin, isn't that going to a cascading effect in other states to basically legalize it? If you see other states basically profiting in a huge margin, and then during the recession?
No, I'll give you another reason why. So in California, right? So we're legal here. But if you do the statistics, and matter of fact, while we're talking about it, let me pull them up, because here's the skinny. So the state of California is legal, but the majority of the counties in this state, they don't allow for just wholesale, like, legal sales like that. Because here's the reason why. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners, okay, were frozen out of the legalization measures. So a lot of counties took a tax hit. They lost a lot of tax revenue because a lot of small time cannabis businesses got put out of business. And so now when you read through Prop 64, when you read the fine details, okay, none of these people are going to be able to get back in. See, so that's lost revenue to all these cities and counties. See, so here's what the cities and counties did. They slapped back. So they said, well, you know what? Check this here out. We ain't selling the shit here. And we're gonna quasi turn a blind eye to the black market. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what's happening in California right now. Only 28% of this state is basically, there's only like a small portion, maybe a little over a fourth of this state is fully legal, where you can just go and walk right into a dispensary, show them your driver's license, and buy some weed. There's only but a few counties in this state where you can do that. The majority of the states froze the shit out. Okay? So what they're going to do, and then in the meantime, what they're going to do is, right now you have all these exploratory committees in all these counties, right? And what they're doing is they're saying, okay, what is a way that we can institute what we did have under the current framework? See, look, small businesses employ the majority of the people in this country.
Okay,
so it's not as cut and dry or as simple as it may look on the surface. I can tell you, coming from California, and I can tell you, coming from the fact that I got a gang of friends and stuff like that who got put out of business.
You're isolating basically based on California, but if you looked at Colorado, based on the income taxes and all that coming from Colorado, that Colorado basically is one of those states that basically benefits most of the state taxes from cannabis.
Oh, no, and there's no disagreements there. But what I'm saying is this: California is the most populous state in the union. Number one. Number two, I think it has the number 6 or number 7 largest GDP on the planet, and that's with other countries.
But remember, the GDP of California is not only dependent on cannabis; it's dependent on tech. It's
dependent on a number of things. But I'm talking about the sheer the size and scope of the GDP in this state here. And what I'm saying is that even with all of that, most of the counties said, you know what, this was a bad deal.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Dr. Phoenix, do you have anything you want to add to this? Feel free to jump in if you do.
Oh no, brother, I'm just listening. I'll let you guys finish, and then I'll actually say something about what you guys were talking about earlier about the community gardening and stuff like that. Because I actually did some lectures with my mentor, who invited in a nurse who does stuff exactly like this. And so I'll let you guys finish what you all were talking about, then I'll just chime in.
Yeah. So some of the battling that we've seen here, and I sent Business Wealth Power the articles.
We're gonna cover some of those here.
Yeah. We sent them some of those articles. So there's been big battles here about keeping big retail and outside pale-face investors from coming in and trying to take over, like Reynolds and some of these cigarette companies and alcohol beverage companies trying to come in and take over. They won't have a way to penetrate the market here. So the idea here is to for Black people to organize and actually start creating research and development. Complex and myself has talked about this, setting up a shipping container, doing the labor and turning it into a isolated lab where you can do all your strand development and research and stuff like that. There's a whole entire ecosystem built around this, and trying to have these conversations right here is where it needs to really start. Business Wealth and Power, who were already talking about this a year and a half ago. But
Well, yeah, I actually, like I said, I saw this personally,
mhm,
where like I said, my mentor, she had invited me in to do some health education classes at a church here in my city,
mhm,
but she also invited one of her other former students who was also who was also a nurse, and so she's actually, believe it or not, she's not ADOS, she's from Uganda.
yeah,
And so she did, she learned, she had all these skills that she learned back home. And so, but she came here as a refugee or whatever. And so she became a nurse. But anyhow, she does home gardening. So some of the stuff that you all were talking about earlier was just, doing stuff like gardening in your windowsills, in your backyard, finding little spaces and, in the areas you live in where you can do. They were doing exactly that. My mentor actually has funding through the American Cancer Society, and so she was able to take some of her funding, and this was part of that research she was doing, and so she was able to take it and buy stuff, and we were able to, she was able to have this person come in, do a lot of educating, and so the folks started planting like herbs and greens like kale and stuff like that, tomatoes. There were folks planting tomatoes and beans and stuff like that. Red peppers and all kinds of vegetables that they were able to plant in small pots, in
mhm,
their windows and such like that. And people were having very good yields, and some of the church members already had their own private gardens as well, and so they were getting their children and grandchildren involved and stuff like that.
yep,
And this was a good way to sort of facilitate community health, facilitating getting younger people more active and more involved with taking charge of their health and eating healthy and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that just go into not just just sort of the 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 financial aspects, which are extremely important, because a lot of these areas, especially like where I'm at, you got a lot of in a lot of areas where black folks are at, you have a lot of abandoned lots, abandoned
Mhm.
homes, stuff like that, places where people can get together and they can create these cooperatives where you can do community gardening and stuff like that. And it's actually a bit easier to do it here in my city than I would probably say it is in many other cities, because they tend to be very particular about that stuff. But
yeah,
Dr.
not in my
Phoenix,
backyard.
yeah. Dr. Phoenix, I got a question for you because you're from the same area of Chicago that my wife was from, and I spent 3 years over on the South Side. So I'm no stranger to what it is that you know intimately about where you come from. Would you say that a lot of those abandoned empty lots and places like that over like on the south side, I never really spent much time over on the west side, so I'll speak more specifically to the south side. Would you say that that could go a long way in solving the food desert problem?
yeah, the interesting thing about it is that I actually the first half of my childhood I spent growing up in what is called Inglewood.
Okay, yeah, I
Is,
know,
is,
yeah, I know.
is a neighborhood called Inglewood. At that
Mhm.
time, considered one of the worst neighborhoods in the country. But anyhow, they for years, decades. I mean, there were a number of abandoned lots, houses, and in fact, they closed a number of the schools down in that neighborhood. That a number of the elementary schools, and so yeah, I mean, this stuff does go a long way. But I will also add too that in that area, particularly on the south side, the Inglewood neighborhood, they opened the very first Whole Foods. Well, I don't know if it's open yet, but I know they were building it. They
Oh,
opened
really?
the very first Whole Foods, or at least is in development, um, on the south side of Chicago. I think it might be open now. I'm not entirely
Wait,
sure.
there's what now? Are we talking about high? Because they opened up one in Hyde Park,
Oh, I mean, Hyde Park is always.
but
I
that's
mean,
that's kind of
that's university. That's where Obama has his home at. That's the
yeah.
University of Chicago. So I would
So we're
expect
not talking about over there.
yeah, because they have a Trader Joe's over there and all that too.
Yeah,
But
but Treasure Island shut
yeah,
down because of that,
yeah,
and I think there's one other store that's over there that shut down too. But
yeah. They
okay,
used to
but you're
have
not
a
talking about Hyde Park though.
yeah. But why was that is so important? Because again, Inglewood. So basically, if you go just south of the downtown of Chicago, so if you go around where the White Sox played, 35th and
35th, yeah.
yeah, 35th Street. I mean, that's really the start of what we call Bronzeville,
Hmm.
really.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Bronzeville, and so if you keep going south, eventually you'll hit Inglewood.
Right.
And so, and why was that important? Because for decades, Inglewood has been a severely economically deprived area. I mean, they closed down lots of. Used to be a lot. Chicago used to have a lot of black-owned banks
Yep.
back in the day, and a lot of those banks closed down. But the reason why that was important for had that Whole Foods there, because there's a really well-known community college there that they completely rebuilt. They started in the early 2000s and finished it up about a decade or so ago. It was called
Wow.
Kennedy King College. They completely rebuilt it. It went from this small community college to sort of more like this more sprawling campus. And just literally about 2-3 blocks away, you have that Whole Foods that I was just
Wow.
talking about. And so, and there used to be like a Jewel Osco in that area.
Yep. Yep.
There used to be a couple of pretty well-known grocery chains in that area, but they closed down over the years. And so essentially you had that entire area for miles that was essentially a food desert. And I mean, there's an Aldi's. I think there still might be an Aldi's near there.
Aldi's over there. Yeah.
Yeah, but for the most part, the options for food were pretty limited in that area. And so they're in the process of building. I don't know if it's open yet, of building that Whole Foods over there. And I think it is one of those things that's always been a problem especially on the south side of Chicago, where I grew up at in the Chatham neighborhood, which is you don't have that problem over there because you have a big shopping area off 87th Street and all of that over there. So you don't really have a problem necessarily with food deserts in particular. But yeah, if you go a little further further into the city, into the heart of Inglewood, that was always a problem. Bronzeville certainly had that problem up until probably the last 5 or 7 years, because they've gentrified the hell out of Bronzeville.
I know, man. Look,
it's not even black anymore.
My wife, she was commenting on it like, dude, this is, man, when we had first got to Chicago back in 2013, she was like, look, I never seen so many like mixed couples and stuff like that. Bronzeville is quickly starting to look like Hyde Park.
The
Starbucks opening up over there.
I mean, the proximity, Bronzeville is literally right next to Hyde Park. So basically you have Bronzeville, then you have Kenwood, and then you have Hyde Park. They're pretty much right next to each other. And so pretty much all of Hyde Park, you might as well just call it University of Chicago area, because they pretty much own everything over there.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think they do that to gentrify the area.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happens. You have these big university systems where they can buy up essentially entire neighborhoods, and they have their own police. They have their own police over there. That police the area. I mean, they're real police officers, but they're functioning as a police system
for the university.
Within a police system. They're university.
They're deputized. He's right. They're deputized by the state.
Yeah,
so they have the ability to arrest anybody within their vicinity, even beyond that. And they get training in Israel. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, and the reason to go to the whole point of why your question was so important, because I remember growing up as a kid, man, there were just so many abandoned buildings, so many abandoned lots. I mean, places where you could have easily set up little farming cooperatives. You could have set up community farming initiatives, and there might be some. Like I said, I haven't been over in that area in a number of years now, but I mean, there might be some over there now. But I just knew I know as a whole growing up, and even up in even to my teenage years, that there was always that opportunity there. And because part of the problem too is because Chicago, like Boston, also had these things where the big retailers were pretty much shut out of the city for the most part. And so, and part of that's because they didn't want to pay quote what was considered a living wage or whatever at that time. So for the most part, your Walmart, your Walmarts and stuff were shut out of building any stores or whatever in within the city itself. So I mean you have local food chains, but for the most part, if you go on the south side, I mean, I was maybe over there, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, probably the last time I was seriously over there. And yeah, I mean, it looked a lot worse than when I was coming up. I mean, I see now, I think even more so gentrification has taken a hold and you just seen because the housing market in particular hit Chicago pretty hard. So you see a lot of those black areas now where folks used to have homes that a lot of those folks have been abandoned. A lot of a lot of those homes have been abandoned, and so they become property of the city. So I mean, a lot of them have tax liens on them. So I mean, you can, if you got the money, you might be able to buy them.
Snatch up blocks,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Oh man, I wish MOT was on here because MOT talks about that a lot, man.
Yep.
I think he's in Colorado as well. And
Yeah, I have a couple of my childhood friends too. They're two sets of twins, and both sets of twins, their parents both are real estate investors. One of my friends, their mother, she used to work for FedEx, but then she worked for FedEx full time, driving for FedEx, but then she became this real estate investor. She has a number of properties in Chicago too, a number of apartment buildings and stuff like that. Then I have another set of childhood friends I grew up. They're also twins, but their dad used to be an engineer. He used to be a water engineer for the city, was former military or whatever. He owned a number of properties. I think he might be out in Vegas now, but the reason I'm saying that is because I've talked with them, and they personally just kind of talked about how you've seen sort of the vacancy of various neighborhoods within the Chicago area. And I cannot stress enough, the Bronzeville, I remember when I was a kid, man, I used to go down there. We used to go to the Billiken Parade when I was a kid, down on King Drive. And I mean, we're talking like a good 5, maybe 10 miles where it was just nothing but black folks. There used to be a very well-known hospital. If you went down on like 29th and King Drive, I was actually born there. But I mean, that hospital closed down. I mean, they gentrified that area. I mean, I was looking at homes over there now. The average home on there is probably about $400,000 or $500,000 now.
What?
Yeah, I was looking at they built a bunch of brand new townhomes over there. They were going for a lot of money over there. It was, I mean, it was no joking. Like, and I mean, this happened quick because about 10 years ago, you done went over there, you would have still saw public housing, you would have saw projects and stuff like that. But 10 years later, all that stuff is gone. And I mean, you do have black folks that do have businesses over there around like 47th and King Drive for the most part in Cottage Grove, but for the most part, a lot of that lower South Side has been completely gentrified, and part of it is because you have IIT, the Illinois Institute of
Technology. Yep.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of craziness. So I agree with everything your wife said. I mean, I came back, I came back to visit maybe about 3-4 years ago, and it was like I didn't even recognize parts of it. So
yeah, and that's why
plenty of opportunities for folks to come in, and if you're investors, your real estate investors, to come in, buy up these places, and even turn them into community gardens if you like. And again, even a lot of the teaching that I've done at the at this church that I have lectures at, I mean, we've talked about just the various benefits of community gardening, just how it relieves stress, how it can be bonding, all kinds of very beneficial effects of just engaging in small scale gardening. It doesn't have to be nothing you have a lot. You can buy plants, pottery, really easy. You can plant herbs, various greens, beans, all kinds of stuff. Like I said, I have a number of the folks that I was teaching lectures to, they came back and talked about like, they were getting yields that they didn't have to buy beans for like a whole year, didn't buy kale for a whole year, stuff that, kale can be kind of expensive if you go out and but just lots of ways to get, black folks in charge of taking charge of their community and also their health in the process. So
yeah. I actually planted broccoli and kale today, in squash. So I'm on.
That was another big plant that they're planting a lot of squash too. That was another big one.
Yeah. So going back to the original purpose of this hangout, man. Solidarity work is very important. You got to build alliances. We talked about this on the Black Cultural Intelligence Hangout, the very first one, about building a global alliances. A lot of Black Americans think that they can fight alone, and that's not the case anymore. You're in a globalized society. You gotta build alliances. A lot of the people that are there, even the kids that are there, they're woke. They'll call out, white supremacy. They'll call out, institutional injustices and things of that nature, they'll call it out, and they're only 9, 10 years old, so they're already grooming their kids to be
Socially
resistance fighters.
conscious. Yeah.
Yeah, socially conscious and resistance fighters, man. That's embedded in the development of these solidarity groups. And agriculture and things like that is also a part of it, because a lot of them have come from Palestine. They've come from Libya, and other places. So they're accustomed to doing a lot of this work because they had olive gardens and things of that
That were
nature.
destroyed. That were destroyed.
Yeah, that were destroyed. So they understood the necessity to actually being involved in things like that, taken away by Zionist occupation. So the resistance is real.
I think you bring up a good point, brother, because that actually reminds me of something. I cannot stress enough how many folks that I know that are in healthcare that have private gardens. They have community gardens. They do a lot of this stuff. They teach it to each other. They teach it to their children. And this is something that as a people we should be more wholeheartedly invested in. Being able to grow our own food. I mean, we know that food deserts have always been an issue within inner city environments.
Yeah.
And so, it's not like there's not the land available for this. We know the land is available.
There's over 100,000 parcels available in predominantly Black neighborhoods across America. 100,000, just like what you see in the picture. So,
I'm sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and you can, if you're going to use it for this type of purpose, you're not going to put a house on it. The city's going to back you on this because they don't want the parcel to sit there empty. They want to collect taxes on it, or they want somebody to take it off of their hands. But you also have to have a building permit. So sometimes, like I said before in the beginning, the property may not be viable for housing development, and they want the property off of their hands as soon as possible. So if that's going to be the case, this may be the new strategy for countering institutional oppression.
Yeah, I agree.
You got to corner the market with the land first. You got to come in there and start building up infrastructure. We talked about this many times, Complex, myself, and Paul Bryant, the rest of us, for over a year now, and the investment is in the infrastructure, whether it's here or it's in Africa, on the continent. The investment in the infrastructure.
I would agree with that. Like I said, all your cities, they all have homes on the books that they, that either been foreclosed on or tax liens or whatever the case may be. And you can get these homes for pennies on the dollar. I mean, just land, not even just homes, but land in general that they have on their books that they're trying to get rid of. Mm-hmm. I mean, $5,000-$10,000, maybe a little bit more, but I mean, stuff that's, pretty affordable for the most part, that you can turn into stuff like this community garden right here. Mm-hmm. in this photo. So I mean, again, these are things that collectively as a people we can do, and I agree. This is a collective effort. This is a group effort, and so we cannot expect that that we're gonna do this all by ourselves. Even as even ADOS, we cannot expect that we can't at least ally ourselves with with the other with the brothers and sisters in the diaspora, like I said, that come from countries where agriculture is a big part of the culture.
Yeah,
they have these skills. Sure. And I don't this silly notion where, oh well, we all can't benefit from the skills that one group has versus the other. I don't care if we all have the skills to get to the same end goal, then it is what it is. See, white folks and all these other groups of people, they totally believe in outlining themselves even with people that are not them, just because we all have a shared interest.
And like you see in the photo, there's other white people there that are like, yo, I'm down with it, and they woke too. They like, I'm down with it. They identify themselves as communists and stuff like that, but they're 100% down, with the struggle. So I just find it interesting that on YouTube you get everybody's piggybacking the hashtag, but I don't see anybody out there doing the real work.
Engineer, you have something to say, brother?
Yes, I'm a proponent, especially in the cannabis space. I'm a proponent in tech. especially tech engineering, especially in the cannabis space,
Mhm.
because in that space there's a lot of advantages and a lot of opportunities, especially currently in a dispensary. There isn't any measure of potency in terms of customer and potency for cannabis.
Mhm.
So if especially tech can take care of it, data analysis, data analytics, there isn't even a database in terms of strain, customer. There's a lot of missing proponents, especially in the tech side. And I believe there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the tech for cybersecurity, even for a logistics company. So
Engineering, where are you from?
I'm a Nigerian.
Okay, okay.
So I basically have a background in engineering and everything. So I got into the space based on my background. I was a nuclear weapons engineer. So basically from there, I basically knew a lot of requirements a lot of requirements in that space. There were more requirements in that space than even in cannabis.
Mhm.
So based on that, I basically decided to jump into the space and basically start looking at tech, especially tech related
Yeah,
issues.
I work in cybersecurity, so I can tell you firsthand that you are right on the money with this.
So,
There's the emergent tech side behind the agricultural piece. And we did a whole hangout on this called agritech, I think it was
Yeah. Yep.
some
Some
months
months
ago. We
ago.
talked about this, man, and there's all types of opportunities involved for this, man.
so that's why there shouldn't be a limiting. That's one thing I always talk about the channel. There shouldn't be a limiting approach to cannabis. There's a You can look into logistics from transportation to cultivation to even packaging to HR. Human resources is a big business opportunity in the cannabis space.
We're gonna,
So,
I think actually we're gonna cover that a little bit later. I was gonna talk about, I was gonna go through some of my some of my Indeed job alerts that I get.
let,
And
let
I
me stop
wanted,
sharing my screen.
okay, yeah, because Mike, yeah, I was gonna ask you in a minute. I wanted to share an article. I was gonna read over. We could talk about it because it completely relates to this.
Yeah, go right
Um,
ahead.
okay, but yeah, engineering. Shit, hold on a second. Yeah. You know what, man? No, you're absolutely right though, because I was gonna cover some of the Indeed job postings that I get. I'm subscribed to like anything that's hemp or cannabis related as far as job postings. So I get, man, I probably get like 30 to 50 postings like literally per week.
and yeah,
And
it's not only for jobs, but the businesses itself.
yeah,
There are a lot of business opportunities nobody's looking at. And I keep trying to tell individuals this space is growing. There are a lot of companies that you can open up quickly and start looking into tech itself.
This is the
Nobody's looking.
You know, I would also concur with what engineering cannabis is saying as well,
Mhm.
from just a healthcare perspective. I mean, again, I mean, if you were to Google physicians in cannabis or nurses in cannabis on YouTube right now, I mean, excuse me, search for it, you would see hundreds and hundreds of videos pop up of nurses having cannabis business. You got physicians finally jumping onto the mix, and now that you're having this legalization of marijuana that's happening in states across the country, you're seeing now that medical marijuana. I mean, the first place to really do it legally was the VA, and you're seeing places like that where physicians and nurse practitioners now they're starting to get into prescribing medical marijuana and just into also prescribing using cannabis as a form of treatment for all kinds of disease. My background is in critical care, so I see folks across the gamut with all kinds of chronic issues. And so, you know, I see folks with everything from non-healing wounds to cardiovascular disease, to cancer, to everything. And so, just the implications of the usage of cannabis and having businesses built around it, especially if you're in the healthcare arena. I mean, this is an area where we're just really starting to touch.
Yeah, I mean, we could be talking about hemp-based weave. I mean, different types of strands. You know, yaki Kush or something like that.
And the funny thing is, we've not even scratched the surface. When the infusion, let's look into the infusion side. When big companies start looking at infusion of cannabis in their products, they'll need a lot of people from lawyers and all these individuals who have the expertise. And remember, when you infuse it, now you have to discuss it. Is it its own product, or is it an alcoholic product? If you infuse it with alcohol, is it an alcoholic product, or is it its own product itself? And if it's its own product, what are the services that's going to include in that?
Well,
From
brother,
transportation to tech to all that. So everybody's nobody. And since I've been in YouTube, your channel is just one of the channels I've seen discuss it, but nobody's discussing it. Everybody, all I see online is basically stars and everybody just talking of how they invest in it, but nobody's talking about what's going on in the industry itself. Nobody's talking about the opportunities that's growing. Nobody's talking about the future plans of it. So it's kind of I started looking into it and I started looking at and I saw a lot of opportunities, especially in the tech side, and a lot of, even with the vape pens, a lot of vape pens are coming out, but there are not a lot of vape pens with the African American concentration in mind coming out.
I mean, I mean, if you just, I mean, somebody, I think the brother Motown 313 posted it up. I mean, the applications for folks, for providers, and for healthcare providers are endless for cannabis. I mean, we're looking at it for everything from treating opioid addiction. Typically, folks got methadone and stuff like that, or naltrexone, we're using everything from pain management, um, uh, uh, treatment for cancer. I mean, well, treatment to mitigate the side effects of cancer therapies, uh, mental health disorders. I mean, everything from depression to neuropsychiatric disorders like status epilepticus or epilepsy. I mean, so I mean, the applications for healthcare providers and the use of cannabis is they're endless. I mean, there's research coming out practically daily showing like it's good for all these, for all these things. Now, I know folks talked about using it for like diabetes, which it's kind of been kind of wishy-washy when it comes to diabetes and like diabetic neuropathy, which is nerve damage from long-term diabetes. Um, if you catch it early, I've seen studies that have said that you can treat it very well and maybe even reverse it using cannabis. But if you kind of using it on sort of folks who've had severe or long-term diabetic neuropathy, it might not be as effective. But however, just the applications of cannabis medically across all spectrums of diseases and specialties within healthcare are endless.
Okay. Hey, I want to. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, engineer. I want to read this article after you finish up here.
And in terms of the healthcare, there are a lot of opportunities in terms of they've not even scratched the surface of researching the effects of cannabis with different drugs itself, and there's a lot of research that have not even been proven yet. So
Yeah,
it's in the healthcare field is going to be expanding.
yeah, I would agree with that. I agree with that because you have there is research that is showing that how cannabis has synergistic effects with different classes of drugs where it actually increases the efficacy of the drug.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we're seeing that I've seen some studies and I've been to some lectures on that stuff. So yeah.
Okay,
so the opportunities are boundless. So we just need to look into it and continue looking into it as we go on.
Yeah, well, let me kind of speak to opportunity, right? And this is one of these things where perhaps this should be on the docket for the hashtag contingency to address, because perhaps this could also be something that could be placed on the ADOS docket in terms of a platform, right? Speaking of reparations, but let's dig into a little bit more about this and let's kind of parse out some of the idiosyncrasies and maybe even some of the hypocrisies that's come out of something that could be to the benefit of the hashtag crew. Should Cynthia Nixon apologize for her reparations comment? New York gubernatorial candidate and former Sex and the City co-star Cynthia Nixon has a pretty progressive campaign platform on racial equity and cannabis legalization. So what's the problem? Now, if you'll notice that the date actually goes back past a year. We've been discussing this. We started discussing this when this happened. So this has been on our radar for over a year now. And we brought it up in a multitude of discussions that we've had to kind of point out some of the ways that we actually get in the way of reparations. Oddly enough, New York gubernatorial candidate and former Sex and the City co-star Cynthia Nixon has been getting Mirandized, that is, her rights, that is, read her rights, by black activists and elected officials about what terms of art she may and may not use when discussing cannabis, racial equity, and reparations. Speaking with Forbes.com after the New York City Cannabis Parade last weekend, Nixon said that people whose lives had been ravaged by the war on drugs should get the first shot at opportunities to open legalized cannabis businesses. Since those people are disproportionately African American, Nixon has couched this proposal in racial equity terms. Arresting people, particularly people of color, for cannabis is the crown jewel in the racist war on drugs, and we must pluck it down, she told Forbes. We must prioritize them in terms of licenses. It's a form of reparations. Pause right there. So I understand that there are those who want the check cut. Okay. But I don't know, when she's talking about licensing and things of that sort for an industry that, you know, just in the next year will be somewhere in the total of, say, 20 to 30 billion in that range right there. And it's only going to expand going forward as more policies are set down with regards to the importation and exportation. You know, federal legalization is all but a guarantee at some point here in the not too distant future. Bet on it. Banking laws with regards to that's already on the table. So why would black folks have a problem with this? Well, let's dig into it. Nixon is far from
emotional. You don't say.
Oh, well, we'll get into that one. Nixon is far from alone in making that kind of connection. Former NAACP executive director Ben Jealous made essentially the same point when he gave a keynote speech at the National Cannabis Policy Summit in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. Yet, several high-profile African-American figures around New York have taken exception to Nixon's comments, even suggesting that they may have been racially insensitive. Insensitivity. You don't say. Kia Morgan Smith, reporting on it for thegrio.com, said that Nixon needs a history lesson after she offended the African-American community by saying that legalizing marijuana could serve as a reparations in black communities. I would invite everybody to go look up the definition of the word reparations, and you tell me if it's applicable or not. MSNBC pundit Al Sharpton, who's also a longtime New York City activist, tweeted that putting pot shops in our communities is not reparations. Black Lives Matter of Greater New York said that Nixon's proposal does a disservice by invoking stereotypes of African Americans as drug users, and even a greater disservice to the legacy of slavery and racial segregation. Nixon's recommendations fall squarely in line with appeals that many black racial justice advocates, including the new Jim Crow author Michelle Alexander, have been making for years. In fact, a staple item of the platform created by the Movement for Black Lives, which consists of Black Lives Matter chapters across the nation, says the retroactive decriminalization, immediate release, and record expungement of all drug-related offenses in prostitution, and reparations for the devastating impact of the war on drugs and criminalization of prostitution, including a reinvestment. I don't know how they're putting the two together, prostitution and cannabis legalization, including a reinvestment of the resulting savings and revenue into restorative services, mental health services, job programs, and other programs supported by those impacted by the sex and drug trade. It seems that some of the people attacking Nixon's comments are doing so on the grounds that she misapplied or maybe even misappropriated the term reparations in her Forbes interview. It is true that there is and has been a specific conversation about reparations for slavery in the Americas. However, there is no individual organization that holds a monopoly on what reparations means or what format it must take. I'm going to say that again. However, there is no individual or organization that holds a monopoly on what reparations means or what format it must take. Let that one sink in for a minute. For Manhattan Democratic
I partially
Party,
agree with that statement. I'm probably 50-50 on that statement, but I'll explain later.
What? That there's no individual or organization that holds a monopoly on what reparations means?
Yeah, I think arguably if what reparation really means, I think it ultimately does have to come from the people that are being the beneficiaries of it. I do believe that does have to be spoken in their interest. However, I don't see a problem with her comment, so I'm not sure why.
Well, that's the whole thing. That's the point that statement's making. Like, there's no individual or organization that holds a monopoly on what reparations means, meaning that it can come in many forms, not just a check.
No, I agree. I personally think that reparations, it isn't just a check. I think a lot of it is policy initiative, because I think arguably you'll get better gains out of policy initiatives than maybe even a check. Because
that's what, and apparently that's what Cynthia Nixon thought too.
Yeah.
For Manhattan Democratic Party Chairman Keith Wright, though, there can only be one definition. Reparations is repayment for the free labor that built this country, said Wright in thegrio.com. It is insulting to my soul that the free labor that my ancestors gave to this country would be equated with the selling of marijuana. Now, see, that's about as disingenuous as it gets.
No, that's a complete mischaracterization of what she's saying. Now that is a really emotional retort, but I think that is a complete mischaracterization. Because I've known about the comment she made now for quite some time. Mm-hmm. I just personally believe that I don't have a problem with what she said. I think it can be one form of reparations. She never said it was the end all be all.
No, she was literally speaking because she was at a cannabis rally. Okay, we have to keep it in the context of what she said, right? A cannabis rally. Part of her platform had to do with allowing Black folks to have first seat when it comes to licensing of cannabis businesses.
In terms of regulations and requirements, and especially in Chicago just enacted the social equity policies for cannabis, and basically providing not only funds for individuals who are being affected by the cannabis laws, but also provides basically scholarships for licenses, and also basically enough money to help individuals who can get licenses, but who's been affected.
That's a part of the social equity platform, is to help them accelerate. So this is a business accelerator platform, right? As well as an incubator platform for those businesses, which is why they tend to struggle a lot. Is because there's a lack of organization on the ground.
There's also a mentorship aspect of that too. Yep. Basically provided in the Chicago requirements and laws for the cannabis. There's a mentorship side too. So the social equity covers both mentorship and also providing funds and basically scholarships for individuals.
And there should be an ADOS Black Cannabis Caucus that focuses all around this sort of a perspective and platform. But go ahead, Dr. Phoenix.
No, I was just gonna say, no, I agree with what you're saying. I think probably the biggest issue out before you even get to the licensing is making sure that Black people do have the capital to get these businesses going. I think that's probably the biggest issue. You can streamline the licensing process, put Black folks at the front of the line for this. However, if you don't have the capital to get this going, then it's just kind of dead in the water.
Well, and
Well,
I'll tell you. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that they're trying to provide capital as well
Okay.
from the Small Business Association, SBA.
Okay. Okay, I can get with that. You know,
And,
like I said, I can get with that. I completely, you know, I'm not sure why folks are tripping about this, but
well, and I gotta
Well,
tell you too. Like I know, like let's say, okay. So a good friend of mine, man, is a childhood friend of mine. He has a cannabis business in the state of Colorado. Okay. He grew up, but basically half time in Colorado, half time in California. He's my next door neighbor, white kid. And so, long story short, he had a son. Son has like major epilepsy, right? So he started a cannabis company. Uh, Primarily, in largely, it was really the whole point of it was to create something or formulate something that would help his son's condition. Okay, that was family, right? That was close friends, peers, people who bought into the idea, and so collectively they put the money together. Okay, you see, so much like how people collectively put money into super chats. Okay, it kind of works like that. But it could also be used for something like this. So I'm just saying that we see instances where people will collectively put money towards something, right? So it's not a concept that we're not familiar with. We would be talking about applying it to something like this, more hyper focused.
no, I agree with that.
No, I'm just putting that out there. So when the question is asked, and I'm just like, look no further than than your 13-hour hangout that takes place and all the super chats that pop up as a result of it. This is all I'm saying. I'm going to get back to the article though. The movement for Black Lives statement evinces that there is room for talking about how the drug war must be corrected in reparative terms. Not only that, but the African American Legislative Caucus of Maryland has been pushing the state to include reparation style clauses to its new medical cannabis program. Senator Cory Booker is currently shopping a Marijuana Justice Act bill that seeks reparative reforms to the nation's drug laws. The Harvard Law Review argues that this legislation should include even more reparations language in it. I'm sorry. The Harvard Law Review argues that the legislation should include even more. Meanwhile, Jamel Bowie, chief political correspondent for Slate.com, who is Black, was one of the first to use reparations to describe race-focused cannabis legalization reforms. CityLab has also tagged reparations to the very real cannabis legalization programs currently taking hold in Oakland and in many other cities around California. Now, but I already told you what the problem that's going on in California right now was. It's based on how Prop 64 was written. So there's the Prop 64 lobby that pushed it, and then there's the state at large, and they're button heads right now. In those cities and also soon in the entire state of Massachusetts, shout out to Mike V, those legalized cannabis policies have already shaped the exact thing that Nixon is calling for. And in explicitly explicitly racial justice terms. Almost all of those efforts have been led by African Americans. The reparations dust up may not just be a matter of semantics, though. Some Black officials might just be opposed to legalized cannabis on principle. There is, as it stands, a history of Black politicians taking issue with the idea of legalized drugs, whether cannabis or any other illicit substance, in Black communities. James Foreman Jr. recounted much of this history in his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Locking Up Our Own, Crime and Punishment in Black America, which he talks about the complicated decisions Black political and religious leaders made decades ago about drugs that inadvertently exacerbated the drug war and mass incarceration crisis. The two main things on racial justice and cannabis legalization are getting rid of the past drug convictions and making sure that Black and brown and working class and formerly incarcerated people have a chance of being in the legal cannabis business, said Foreman in a phone interview with CityLab. I suspect that those two positions would be, if not universally popular, they'd be reasonably popular today, which is different from the 1970s and 80s, right? When you had a Black community and a Black church that was much more anti-decriminalization of marijuana across the board. It is possible, though, said Foreman, that the problem could be as much about the messenger as it is the message, given that Nixon is white.
I
Okay.
absolutely agree with that. It is all the messenger.
Well, it's all
It's
it's
the
it always
optics.
yeah, it's the optics, right? I mean, it even seems to be that way if you're not by definition ADOS, even though you're melanated. But that's a whole other subject.
Actually, I would not disagree with that statement. I think if you don't pass this litmus test, you it's time to
Right,
screw you up.
right. We write you off, right?
Yeah.
Never mind what it is you might actually be bringing to the table. But like I said, that's a whole other subject.
Well, that's the technocrat in us.
Hey, it is what it is, right?
I think it's just a failure to identify with folks who you have common interests with. If these folks share your interests, you all don't have to be buddy buddy. You ain't gotta be going to Disney World together. But if you both have the same end goal, you can work together to that end goal. And that kind of goes to what I said earlier about just understanding that, identifying folks who have skills and who share the same interests with you, and you work together to get to the end goal.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go ahead and stop there. My whole point in reading that was just essentially the fact that when what we're discussing here this evening, guerrilla farming, legalization of cannabis, and all of that, these are very legit ADOS items that should be on the docket in terms of a platform for the ADOS collective. And when I say that, just due to my geographic location of origination, I would qualify as ADOS. So I'm not speaking as a quote unquote outsider. I'm speaking as someone that by definition would fall into that ADOS category. However, I think things are far more nuanced than the approach that ADOS is taken. And what we're not looking at how we can leverage things like the guerrilla farming aspect, how we can leverage things like the legalization of cannabis, how things like reparations can be sought and acquired in various forms.
Mm-hmm. And this puts us in a front runner position in terms of controlling the market. Now you're talking about. I mean, there has to be at least 24 sort of positions that can come out of just this discussion alone, from the farming aspect to the supply and logistics aspect to the research and development R&D aspect to the retail aspect to the engineering on cannabis mentioned earlier about the lawyer aspect, right? So you need the legal staff to actually cover you in these areas because this is relatively new. Most lawyers don't even understand the complexities behind this as it stands. But if you had, the person with the mouthpiece to actually argue, your position in the court of law, this could actually be very beneficial. The tech aspect behind this, that's going to create jobs. The person who can create the agri-tech, using Raspberry Pis and writing code to to set up water irrigation systems and monitor temperatures inside of a greenhouse. Send alerts to people to your phone, to stakeholders' phone, and say, hey, temperature has reached this much, and based on the weather today, and so on and so forth. There's all types of areas of opportunity that can be aggregated to supply opportunities to ADOS or
there's the blockchain applications, the cryptocurrency applications,
IoT.
Come on, man.
Engineering cannabis. Are you trying to say something?
Yes. In terms of currently, even right now, one aspect is basically in the law enforcement. There isn't a detection mechanism right now to detect when you are impaired with maybe cannabis, to basically detect how much is in the system. Basically, you have to go through a drug lab and wait a couple of days or a week to basically have that test come in. So right now in development is basically trying to develop a way to basically test what the amount in basically based on your saliva itself. And so that technology is still being tested, and it's not even enacted right now.
Well,
So
that
there's a-
becomes dubious, right? Because
yes,
if you
because
smoked last week and you smoked the week
it's
before,
still
smoke
yeah,
that
it's still in the system.
yeah,
It
it's
just
kind of
detects it.
dubious. Yeah, it's dubious, man.
Yeah,
So
but see,
that's why they're still trying to develop that technology to give you that precise.
You know, it is interesting you say that because I was actually I was in on I was sitting on some lectures, and so I think it was Complex that was talking about a childhood friend that has a cannabis shop out in Colorado, I believe.
yeah,
His daughter had epilepsy. I was actually looking because I don't know if people were just going back to what the brother Mike V was just saying about just a R&D for this stuff. I mean, there are clinical trials that are happening now. I'm talking about double blind randomized clinical trials where they're in pediatric settings where you're dealing with pediatric cancer patients, where you're dealing with pediatric patients, excuse me, with epilepsy and other neurological conditions where they're using a placebo versus cannabis. And I think I know for sure the one with the clinical trials for the pediatric patients with cancer, that it was the physicians that were looking at it, they knew immediately which patients got the cannabis versus which one didn't, just based on how they responded. So there's tons of just clinical trials. I mean, you have stuff going on at the NIH right now. There's big pharma companies, pharmacogenomics, pharmacogenetics, big data, a lot of stuff built around that. So I mean, there are serious applications across all industries
And
for
federal funding. There should be soon federal funding on research. The amount of money the government will start pumping in to say, study this plant. What are the effects of this plant?
I mean, there's actually some federal funding on
there's some
small scale.
But when it gets federally legalized, the amount of money is going to be pumped in just to expedite the research, because Israel is far ahead of us in terms of research.
For a long time, yeah.
So in order to expedite that research, the amount of money that's going to be pumped in, especially with the tech and all that, to basically expedite our own knowledge of cannabis. So I always look at the future, always look beyond. So the cannabis, looking beyond that, there's a lot of money is going to be pumped into this sector. So I'll always urge is try to find your niche in it. There's someone in the comments saying it's expensive, but find your niche in it and find ways you can basically benefit from it. And you don't need to touch the plant directly, but you just need to find what skill you have and how you can basically pivot into it. And you can go through that.
And it's not. You have to mute your mic, please. And it's not as expensive as what some of these guys are actually thinking. There's various areas that you get involved in. Again, earlier I talked about sort of food truck as a dispensary, and setting it up in these designated zones throughout the week, so that way everybody gets their fair share of business time allotted. And just the truck alone, the design on the truck, the graphics and everything that goes with that, the supply chain aspect. I mean, there's various areas that
the security aspect. You can be a security, you can be cybersecurity, you can be even guard. You can. There's so much in this that nobody's considering it, and I'm always trying to be a proponent to just jump into it. You have a skill. I was even talking about a packaging company, being a chef and providing nutritious food infused in cannabis. That is an idea that if you say you're providing a nutritious food with cannabis in it, you're providing two good aspects of it. And if you're a chef and know basically concentration amount and all that, and infuse it with good nutritious food, that's a packaged food you can sell all day.
Shout out to the brother Rael in the chat. He said that Israel is ahead of the game on a lot of this stuff, and he's correct because it was actually researchers, biomedical researchers from Israel who actually discovered the endocannabinoid system back in the early '90s. And so, I mean, we've always known about cannabis and its effects, but it was actually researchers in Israel who actually discovered that your body actually has a specific system that actually processes the endocannabinoids.
Yeah, the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, and so and chemically, it is very similar to omega-3s, to fish oils, omega-3s and 6s. I mean, they follow very similar pathways, metabolic pathways in the body. So again, I mean, there's a lot of I mean, I typically talk about this from just the healthcare and the research side of the game because I've always, I'm in research. I like research and stuff like that. But there's all these little niches you can find where you can fit in at, and you could be a researcher and you might want to get into consulting, stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of different niches here you can find your space.
Yeah, a weed consultant.
hey, it's new. So
hey, you know what? I could
market.
Anti-gravity and I could technically be that, man, given as much game we've been putting out over the last 2 years. Business Wealth Power and stuff about the cannabis industry. I mean, this is what we're doing right now is not a departure from what we started doing 2 years ago. I did want to maybe circle back around a little bit to the guerrilla farming, Mike. So just I wanted to just put this out here, right? So Amazon, we talk about Amazon a lot, right? Amazon is also in the business of selling fresh fruit, produce, stuff like that. You could even be a vendor and sell your produce to Amazon to sell to consumers, right? And even people who use Amazon to purchase food, stuff like that, can buy locally through Amazon if they don't buy through you directly, So having these empty lots that you then convert into a community garden or a co-op, a co-op farming operation, community farming, that could then even be leveraged through technology such as Amazon to put that produce out onto the market. Now, Mike, how many lots did you say were vacant in Black communities across the United States?
The number I heard this morning was 100,000 across the United States in predominantly Black neighborhoods.
And let's say so 100,000, and let's just say what each one on average is maybe 5,000 square feet.
It could be a bare minimum of 500 square feet, or like you said, on average upwards of over 1,000 square feet.
So based on the size of maybe the average lot and how many lots that there are vacant in predominantly Black communities, I mean, we're talking about a lot of growing space, huh?
Absolutely. And then let me share my screen.
Okay.
I can show.
I mean, while you guys are doing that, I just want to bring up something because you guys talked about the law aspect. For folks who have biology degrees or you got chemistry backgrounds or whatever, and you weren't thinking about going to med school or something like that, law is probably a good place to try your hand at. You can get into the biotech industry. You do biotech law, and it's big business. It's probably one of the last few areas of law where you can make a lot of damn money. And I personally know this because I had a biology professor. His son was a biology major, wanted to go to med school, changed his mind, ended up going to law school, became a patent lawyer for biotech firms. And so, I mean, and you and I talked about this a while back, Complex, where you have all these different compounds that are going to be isolated.
Yep.
They're being isolated within cannabis that, that are being researched. And so if you're one of these, if you're in law, you're in the biotech industry, you're a big pharma, whatever, you're in law, and you're working with these companies, I mean, these are going to be big areas of, contention.
Yep.
And so, these are all opportunities how you can kind of carve your niche.
Yeah.
I follow.
Yeah. So these are the, this is an example of a farm inside of a shipping container, and this is in Boston here. This is actually right up the street from me. But you have this 40-foot shipping container with the area carved out on the interior for production use. You have your AC unit and propane for energy resources, and some of them I've seen they have solar panels on them, and actually a wind turbine up top of it. Not that big, but big enough to put a few hundred watts into there. That's all you really need for LED lighting. Let me see. Here's this picture right here. You see, this is the inside of a shipping container. This is how they're growing this produce. So when we have these conversations, we're not just having it out of thin air. This is not pie in the sky. This is what's happening in real time.
Because shout out to Young Grizzly. I mean, he's writing code for these types of computer programs and controller programs for the controllers and the software that actually manages this type of growing environment. He's writing the code for this type of stuff. So big ups to him.
Yeah, I don't know much about growing this stuff. I imagine it's probably pretty sensitive, kind of sort of the environment you have to have it in.
Well, if you have a biodome or a greenhouse or even a shipping container like this, you can grow it all year round. It won't even matter.
Okay.
Yeah. And shout out to Huawei too, because Huawei's new operating system is really based on IoT for this very reason. For industrial control systems as well as drones and autonomous vehicles. All of this is encompassed into it. And they plan on spreading this out on the market to dominate Google.
Android,
yeah, Google's product. So
Google better watch out.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, this is what goes into all of this stuff, man. This is really fancy right here. This is actually the one we were looking at earlier from behind the school. But this is what is going on right now. You got the flat screen TV, you got the wash bin and stuff like that. The aisles and stuff. If we're turning this into a cannabis grow box, man, it's game over for a lot of these cats who deny that this opportunity couldn't have come at all. I
mean, again, you brothers are probably one of the handful of folks within this particular space of Black YouTube that legitimately talks about all of these various about all the upheaval within various industries and the opportunities that are present out here, in STEM and tech and whatever have you. So I mean, again, most of these channels aren't really talking about this. I mean, this is stuff that's happening right up under our noses for the most part.
And the funny thing is, if you like in YouTube, if you basically put a search on cannabis businesses or how to start a cannabis business, there's nothing in there. There's no opportunities. There's no research on what kind of licenses you need. There isn't anybody telling you where to go to look at the requirements and laws. There isn't anybody basically distinctively telling you how to get in this industry. There's nobody telling you what the ancillary part is. So I decided to create a channel for that.
Man, look, you know what? I would say this too. The one thing that I have been saying, Anti-Gravity's been saying, Mike's been saying, we've been putting this out here, is if at anything at all, you get involved in hemp, because at least hemp is 50 state legal. See, so you start there, and then you work your way through based on what state you reside in. If there's a medical statute on the books, if there's a recreational statute on the books, or what have you, with hemp you can start. You can get your
with hemp. Even with hemp, there's still no, like, okay, the law states that you can't have a 0.03% THC concentration on your hemp.
Right.
But nobody's talking about how's the quality testing being done.
How is it? I can. Well, I mean, I mean,
How basically is it a sample size? Even though it's a sample size, how is it being done in terms of your farm, your hemp itself?
We
well,
need some folks with some backgrounds in chemistry.
well, no,
Physical.
I was gonna say I can. I really wish anti-gravity is here, because what I could do is I have to find actually for one of our strains. I gotta find the lab results, and I can show you how it breaks it all down. Basically, it breaks down. It gives you a profile of the percentages, or every single compound that's constitute. What is the word I'm trying to use? That's constituted in the plant, and the percentages of each. It also checks for metals, for molds, bacteria, pests. We have the whole entire breakdown.
Because I always ask that question in the States, do you provide your own sample, or do they come in and choose a sample?
No. See, so like depending on how ideally what you want to do is you want to, like, if you're doing one strain, so you're growing a bunch of clones from one mother.
Yeah.
So that's going to say, like, you're going to assign a singular QR code to that harvest from that one strain. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take multiple samples, right, from all of those, which is from the same strain. And then you're going to send that all in. And what they do is they test each one, and then they average it all out. So from the
average, that's what I was always talking about. So there are a lot in terms of in testing itself, especially if it was done in Chicago or somewhere else. Is it going to be the same way?
Well, no, I mean, well, that's the thing. That's why I said that what you do is it's state by state.
Yeah,
because the states themselves the states are stipulating what the guidelines are going to be. This isn't a national thing.
No, it's not.
Right. So I can tell you about what the guidelines are in California, and then even within those guidelines, there's various ways you can do things. Some people are doing full seed to sell on the blockchain. Okay, we're not on the blockchain, so that's not our method. You know what I mean? So that's the way California's regulations are written out. It could be something as sophisticated as that, or literally it could just be something as pedestrian as saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to take 10 clippings off of 10 clones off of this single mother, and I'm going to send it in, and we're going to get all of it lab tested. I'm going to get the results back, and then as long as this lab that's licensed with the state basically signs off on it, says that, look, the THC constituency in this plant was below 0.03, they're good to go. As long as the pest, mold, and contamination aspects, as long as those pass, yeah, it's good. And that's
that's what I was trying to say. It's different from state to state. So the hemp, knowing the quality testing and all that also has to come in play too. So it's a complex system, but it works.
Yeah.
So,
but we got. I mean, it's like this, man. Like, you know, if everything was easy, everybody would do it, right? You know what I mean? It's those who are bothered with the complexity of things, you know, are typically going to receive, let's see, more of a return on their endeavors, because they took it upon themselves to go about doing complex, work of a complex nature. You know what I mean? So that's, I see, things are kind of expected when we're dealing with things like this. Now, I'll tell you like this, there's other groups of people, they don't give a damn about that. They're like, get it done. Let's get the bread together. What, we got to go get this shit tested? All right, we ready to send this shit in? All right, we're going to send it in, get it tested, get the results back. All right, we're good to go. They ain't tripping on it like that. I mean, we seem to be the only group that looks at what we may have to do and says, wow, this is a mountain when really it's just a molehill. To me, it's something. Look, even in other states, if somebody sent me their samples to get tested, okay, well, the lab results are the lab results. It doesn't really matter. Like what comes back from the lab, a licensed lab that can give you chemical analysis and a breakdown of what the plant what the plant essentially contains. Okay, if it meets within the guidelines of the jurisdiction in which you're going to be doing business, then you're in business. Doesn't really matter. You see, so part of this too is that, look, if brothers like Anti-Gravity, myself, we spent this literally like the last 2 years since he and I linked up and we formed our business. This is what it's just been groundwork for the last 2 years. And it was just like, hey, what do we got to do? We got to go get this done. All right, let's do it. All right, we got to get the money together to do this. All right. You know what I mean? And that's just really what it came down to.
Anti-Gravity is actually on the panel. Do you have anything you want to say the next 10 minutes before we close out?
Oh, is Noah there?
No,
Hey, you guys, how are you?
Oh, hey.
Hey, what's going on, bro?
What's up,
I'm doing good, man. I sent you the link that you were asking for, Ulysses. To be in the chat, so you can pull up the lab results.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Go ahead, and then I'll pull it up.
I already sent it.
Wait, did you send it to which one?
It's in the chat thing. This is my first time on the Zoom, so trying to figure stuff out.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see. Hold on.
And I just want people to keep in mind that a shipping container only costs $1,000.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
And in terms of licenses, if you're in Chicago, I was reading through the requirements for a license for a courier service. It's just $5,000. So you can start a courier service for cannabis for $5,000, and they provide you scholarships for social equity. So there isn't a huge, especially in Chicago, there's still ways to basically enter the industry, especially if you want to touch the plant directly itself.
All right, let me know if you guys.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. All right. So this is hemp bud right here, and this is our certificate of analysis right here. So you see from the safety, pesticides, microbials, mycotoxins, foreign matter, heavy metal, solvents. Okay. Well, there's no solvents in it because it's organically grown. All the other categories passed. And when you look at the cannabinoids and the terpenes, here's the breakdown. So we're talking everything from THC and all the various secondary forms, the Delta-9 THC, THCV, okay, THC-A8, okay, then you have CBD, CBDA, CBC, CBG, CBN, CBGA, and CBDV. These are all of how much is constituted, how much mass per milligram, or the percentage. It's all a breakdown right here. All of the terpenes. It gives you the mass quantities in milligram and percentages. Okay. And yeah, this is what we're talking about right here. So this particular strain here is 16.6% CBD. I mean, it's hemp. On the THC side, it is at below the 0.3%. It's at 0.24. And yeah, this is what we're talking about right here. You see, so you have to get your flower, and you have it sent in for analysis. And when you get results like this, you're good to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Anti-Gravity, if you have anything you want to add, man, before we close out, feel free to do so.
Okay. Nothing in particular to add, but yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. So even with the social equity programs, there's going to be a lot of big money that's going to come in. And they're going to have to be forced to partner with in the social equity program. They're going to have to be forced to partner with disadvantaged groups, or however they kind of phrase the law is phrased. So that could even be an opportunity if you don't have the cash up front, to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, liquor stores are not allowed to actually hold a cannabis license.
Nope.
No, they're not. But now the question is, once you start infusing alcohol with cannabis, you have to start looking at the laws. Is it going to be its own product, where it's going to be shelved in a different store? How is it going to be supplied? How is it going to be delivered? How is it going to be created?
My guess on that would be, given that Constellation Brands, they just acquired. Was that is it Aurora? Which do you know?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, so Constellation Brands essentially makes beer, right? So trust and believe, their legal team is on the job with paying off the proper politicians to allow for the same retail outlets that sell their non-infused alcoholic beverages to sell the infused ones too.
But they created the non-alcoholic beverage infused cannabis, and it sold out in hours. They created it and it sold out in hours.
Yep.
So they're already they're already moving into that aspect. Yep. But the laws around it, I always tell people, look at the laws around it, the requirement, the laws. Those are where the money is. The laws and the requirements. Those are that's where you see the problems, and that's where you solve the solution. You get solutions for the problems.
Yeah, I'm not hearing other platforms actually talk about this ad nauseum the way that we have over the last year and a half. So I'd be interested in hearing, the opinion from those other platforms. Who want to.
I mean, get likes. This doesn't get views. This isn't popular. This isn't sexy. This don't get you all. This don't get you all the females. This don't get XYZ. It don't get you a pot of gold and a rainbow. No, it don't get you anything.
I mean, but I would be curious. A lot of the cut the check hashtag crew. I'm curious as to what their thoughts would be on having a robust, platform for ADOS that includes the talking points and ideas that were discussed here with regards to urban guerrilla farming and cannabis legalization.
I mean, even the article you read off earlier about Cynthia Nixon.
Cynthia Nixon, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't personally find anything wrong with what she said. I mean, again, you see these very emotional reactions to, oh, maybe it's not the right messenger. Then who should be the messenger? Because clearly the folks that need to be saying it aren't saying it. Mm-hmm. And so who should be the messenger? Some washed up drug dealer that couldn't make nothing happen on the streets, but now he go try to make something happen legit. I don't get it. I mean, you're on YouTube now. I mean, you got a bunch of so-called doughboys on YouTube now telling black folks what's black, what's ADOS, and all this other crap. So I mean, again, is what is truly the end goal here? Because I don't want to throw shade at people, but again, I think these are very important conversations because her comments weren't wrong, because this can all be part of a much bigger agenda in terms of reparations. Reparations isn't just about cutting a check. Yes, a check matters because yes, you do need that financial recoupment of unearned of labor that wasn't paid for. I mean, yes, I don't disagree with that, but it doesn't just end there.
Well, I was going to say,
it has to be policies and initiatives involved.
Well, I was going to say, what about ensuring a market share, right, in future earnings?
I would be okay.
Do you reject that?
As an ADOS person myself, no, I whatever puts more money into our pocket, just besides just a check, I'm all for it. So, at the end of the day, if we're going to say this is all about money, then I'm looking at every avenue to get
every avenue. Exactly.
They were just mad with the the terminology of it. That was basically their main gripe with it.
They said it's.
And then
go ahead, Instagram and finish.
Yeah, and then when they torpedoed it, this is New York. Yeah, New York State we're talking about. There's a lot of people there with a lot of big money. So if they don't get in, the Black people in New York don't get a specific set aside like she was, proposing, they'll be completely boxed out of the market completely.
It's interesting you bring that up because even earlier Complex asked a question about Chicago. Again, we're talking about Chicago is the third largest city in the nation, but it has been experiencing a negative Black population growth for the last 5 or 6 years. So Chicago at its height, a third of the population was Black. So you had somewhere around 33-34% of the population was Black. I think last time I checked, it was down to maybe about 29%, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the population of the city as a whole is shrinking, but it's becoming more affluent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll close it out now. Any last thoughts from anybody?
Another fruitful discussion. I think these are. I think this is something that maybe ADOS should pivot and start to look into in terms of a solid inclusion in an ADOS platform, specifically related to the urban farming. Again, 100,000 vacant lots, across America in terms of, open spaces in Black communities. And we're just looking at ways that can be used. See, so there should be a structured platform, urban farming platform. And then I would also say an aggressive pursuit of, the cannabis industry, hemp and cannabis industries. That's my final thoughts.
Again, brother Mike, Complex, thank you guys for having me on. We're just only beginning to scratch the surface of this industry, and there's so many opportunities out here in virtually every space to capitalize on the cannabis industry. And I personally believe that this should be a part of the ADOS platform, reparations platform. I 100% this should be all a part of it. So I'll just at that.
I'd like to thank everybody for basically inviting me to the discussion.
Absolutely.
Also, again, I'm going to echo the same statement everybody's saying. The industry is still in its infancy, but it's coming up in terms of opportunities, from marketing to processing to engineering, tech, anything you want, even cooking. You can be a chef. So find your skill, find your niche, and jump into it. And basically be prepared for it. Read the laws, requirements, and go for it.
Yeah. I just want to echo what, Engineering Cannabis said. It's in its infancy, but, it's very time sensitive because, soon, the big players will become calcified. So there's not much time left to really get involved. And if you don't want to get involved directly, ancillary, services and products are always the way to go. In a gold rush, the people who make the money are the people who sell the, picks and axes and the shovels. So,
look, man, Levi's jeans became what it was because they came up with some pants for people who were prospecting, man. That's where Levi's jeans comes from. So,
hey. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if you have not already done so. Share the video if possible. Hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those on the community page. And we'll be back tomorrow with Mentorship Mondays. So we'll be getting into STEM, healthcare, and every other aspect of mentorship. Anybody is welcome to come onto the panel.
All right.
So with that being said, we are gone. Shalom.
Peace.
Peace.